All right. Well, let's jump in and answer the question. Who is Vagrant Coffee then?
So let's just get this rolling. I think this first podcast, people are going to want to know a tiny bit about who we are.
Yeah.
But that kind of rolls into who Vagrant is.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump in and answer the question. Who is Vagrant Coffee then?
That's fantastic.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a fair question, even though it's a tricky question to answer sometimes when people walk into the cafe and they're like, what is Vagrant Coffee? Sometimes, at least for me, I don't know, are they talking about the institution? Or are they talking about the beans? Or what exactly is their question? But obviously, Vagrant Coffee is a coffee company, and we do coffee things. So just so everybody knows, I guess, Vagrant Coffee started in 2017 and started with Jared and I, and there were other people involved too, but we'll talk about them on a different episode. But we started Vagrant Coffee after kind of brainstorming for a while, working for a different coffee company, like what was missing, I guess, in coffee, and what were the gaps.
Right. And there's been quite the evolution from when we started, 3 years ago, until to what it's morphed into now. So I think at the beginning, the idea was, how do we do what we were currently doing in a brick and mortar retail environment? And how do we take that outside of that context?
Yeah.
And how do we do that out in the rest of the world?
Yeah. I think it was from outside of events that we did to customers asking, hey, do you guys do like special events, or how can I have this at my thing? That we started putting those ideas together.
Right.
And I think another piece of that was, how do you run a successful coffee enterprise and keep your costs down? Because costs are always ridiculous.
Right.
So we started kicking around some of those ideas and jotting them down and exploring and asking a lot of questions. And ultimately, we came up with the idea of, okay, let's build some equipment of some sort and be able to replicate what we do in a brick and mortar cafe outside of the cafe.
Right. So those were really the two pieces that we noticed. Sorry, that's a grinder. We're still an active coffee shop. There's two pieces that we were noticing. One was the cafe that we were at then wasn't doing events. So they got requests all the time. Hey, can you do a wedding, or can you do espresso somewhere outside of this building?
Yeah.
And their answer was always no. And so we knew that there was a market for it. So that was the first part. And we also knew from looking at starting cafes that the biggest, most cost prohibitive part of that was the retail store build out.
Yeah. So I guess it's safe to say, when we started Vagrant, we started from a place of actually knowing how coffee works.
Right. And that's a huge leg up.
Yeah.
To get into the coffee.
Yeah, it wasn't like we were starting from scratch, like not straight out of school or just have some dream. We actually knew, okay, this is how you make really good coffee, and we need to figure out a way to make really good coffee anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And that part was definitely a learning experience, because while we knew how to make coffee in a building, things change once you leave that building. Once you don't have control over all of the elements, including but not limited to weather.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So in 2017 is when we decided, okay, let's do this thing. It started with us getting equipment and putting that equipment together the best we knew how with the tools that we had. And trying to figure out what it would look like to do these things outside of the cafe. We also started with another person involved who helped us roast. And I think that was also a really big part of kind of what made us us, was that we weren't necessarily connected to any other coffee establishment around us. We were roasting our own beans. We had our own equipment. We had our own thing going.
Yeah.
And so we were completely separate from any other coffee enterprise around, with the exception that people knew who we were because of our work in coffee around this area.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And looking back, I don't know if that was the most important decision that we made. I think that in a lot of ways complicated what we did right off the bat, trying to do the retail stuff and trying to get a roasting program off the ground, which there's so many pieces involved in that part of the business. But I do think that it was helpful for us, just for the name recognition. There's some sort of, you get a little bit of street cred by roasting your own.
Yeah, for sure.
In the coffee community, as opposed to just buying somebody else's coffee. So while it probably overcomplicated things and made us move a little bit slower than I would have liked right at the beginning, I think looking back, it probably was helpful.
Yeah. So what we did first was we bought some home equipment, home espresso equipment, and we built a custom table with the help of a friend to kind of create a mobile cafe that was still pretty solid in its construction, that we could just take with us anywhere. And we also did our best to start the process of building out our brand. So another question that I think that we get quite often is like, where does the name come from? And what about our logo and the hot air balloon? And what we wanted was kind of a combination of what I say is like three different factors. One, we wanted a name that was unique and memorable. And there's a lot of different coffee companies out there. And so we started exploring what can we call ourselves that is going to be something that people can remember. But then also something that implied this mobility. And we thought at the time that we were just going to do mobile outside of the cafe, coffee related stuff. Right. And then we wanted something that wasn't taken, something that was something that wasn't used a whole bunch. And so,
which is a bigger challenge than some people might realize.
Yeah.
A lot of good names have been taken in the coffee world.
Yeah. So we kicked around a lot of ideas for a while and eventually landed on Vagrant. It kind of hit all three things. It was memorable. It was emphasizing that mobility, and it was something that really wasn't taken. I mean, I guess part of that's because it's really edgy to call yourself a vagrant. But our setup was really nice looking. We had really great equipment. It was very clean. And so it's kind of this play on words that we were hoping would really stick with people.
Right. There's a certain juxtaposition to have a nice, well-polished setup and brand, but then call it Vagrant.
Yeah. So we got in touch with a branding expert guy, and we kind of kicked around this ideas of this, spirit of adventure and exploration, and somehow in there, hot air balloons seemed cool. So I know that I've always liked hot air balloons, so we kind of kicked around this idea, and that ultimately, over the course of, I guess, a couple of months, whittled down into calling it Vagrant Coffee and having our logo of the hot air balloon kind of drifting in that spirit of adventure. I also think, though, that that's given us a little bit of a weird vibe with some people, considering we're based in Baltimore City, and then our logo is a hot air balloon in mountains. A lot of people think like, oh, you guys aren't from here, and it's like, no, we're from here.
Right. In Baltimore, most people get the vagrant part.
Yeah,
it's the hot air balloon in the mountains that don't hit home quite as well.
Yeah, but it also helps us because we're not planning on just staying here in Baltimore. We want to go elsewhere. And so it's kind of this broad, universal idea of like, oh, okay, we can kind of move around a bit. So that was the idea when we started. We spent pretty much all of 2018 doing a lot of pop-ups, farmers markets, special events, and coffee delivery. Especially once we built out the Mini Cooper.
Right. And I think it's important to note that whole time, I mean, we were bootstrapping in every sense of the word. Every single time we did an event, every dollar that came from that event got rolled back into the business. We were all working other jobs to pay our bills while we were hustling in between those jobs. So it really was like we didn't have a lot of money behind us going into this. We didn't have any money behind us going into this. There was a lot of credit cards. There was a lot of late nights and long working hours. We just figured it out and hustled our way through.
Yeah. We took what we had, and we did our best with what we could.
Yeah. I mean, it was loading all of our equipment in the back of your minivan. It was crazy. Sometimes there were still kids in the minivan too.
Yeah. So to say we pulled ourselves up by the bootstraps is certainly the understatement of the year.
Right.
We did what we needed to do in order to try to get that name out there, and I think it was a whole lot of like friend connections, really.
Right.
And just trying to tell our friends, hey, we're doing this thing. We're trying to make good coffee, and we can do this stuff outside of the cafe. Are you interested in maybe having us for something? It really doesn't matter what, just something. And trying to make $1 out of it. And so
I think the things that really helped us, one, I think what we did a great job was leveraging the name recognition that we already had in the coffee community.
Yeah, absolutely.
So people already knew Josh and Jared from the different latte art competitions and different events that we were doing. So that was helpful. And then just like asking everybody if they were ready to have an event with coffee at it. And we got told no more times than I can count, but we got told yes enough that we were able to make ends meet and keep plugging away at things.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't know, I'm thinking through like defining moments that kind of like solidified things for us. One was landing that first wholesale account.
Yeah. That was big.
That was big. It was with a friend who owned a cafe who was willing to take a chance on some people who were just trying to figure it out. And there's, of course, a whole lot more to that story now because we own that cafe now. But it was a risk. And I'm really thankful that there were people out there who were willing to say, okay, let's give these guys a shot.
Yeah. And at that point, that was close to 50% of our revenue coming in with that one single wholesale account.
Yeah.
That was big for us.
Yeah. But we did our best to also do take advantage anyway of the farmers markets that would let us in. When you're coming up from nothing, there's a whole lot of other more established coffee places in town who kind of own these farmers markets.
Yeah, it's like a little farmers market mafia going on.
Yeah.
There were several farmers markets. They were like, no, we've already got our coffee vendor.
Yeah. So we took some non super popular ones.
Yeah.
And we got to kind of work out some kinks with all of our heavy equipment, and I think that's when we started to understand maybe why people don't do this.
Yeah. It's hard.
From how many tents have we destroyed? We've destroyed like 5 tents.
A lot, yeah.
Just because they don't hold up that well. And lots of heavy moving. There were some super cold days. There were super hot days.
Super windy days.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's ever tried to pull a shot of espresso in the wind. It's a challenge.
Yeah, or when you can't feel your hands because it's too cold. But I think then what also happened was we got a weekend gig at a bakery. A small bakery said that they wanted to, they were also new. They wanted to serve the community a little bit better. So they brought us in on the weekend to make espresso drinks inside their cafe, and we sold it by the cup. And that also gave us a little bit more of a chance to kind of tweak out some of those pieces that we were still trying to iron out. Operationally, it worked the same as what you're in a cafe, but when you're in a different environment, people don't know your name. It's easier said than done.
Right.
Yeah.
And even just the challenge of having to load in and load out every single day.
Yeah.
That we did that. It was brutal.
I think that was one of the big pieces that we learned. Espresso machines are heavy.
Yes.
And we were trying to bring on other people so that way we could take some time off. And having other people pick up a 100-pound espresso machine is not an easy thing to task somebody else to do. We can do it, but to ask other people to do it is complicated. And of course, if you drop it, you can only drop it once.
Right.
And then it's toast. So
and in our case, especially at that point, probably not as much now, but at that point, if we had dropped and ruined an espresso machine, we were out of business.
Yeah.
Like we didn't have the money to buy another one, and we couldn't do events without that one. So it really was like it was a tricky scenario to be in.
Yeah. But then I think the other piece that really helped us was when we got into the co-working space Impact Hub.
Right.
So I had been volunteering at Impact Hub before for a while. And when they built out this space, they had this little pseudo cafe area that they had kind of invited us to be in. At the beginning, it was only 2 days a week, I think.
Right.
And there was a lot of load in, load out every day of all of our equipment. And it was some tough going being in a space for 2 days a week that didn't have a whole lot of foot traffic, didn't have a whole lot of people inside, but it was something, and it was a little bit more consistent than anything else we had. But then eventually that grew to 5 days a week, being there Monday through Friday, setting up, I don't even remember what the hours were, 7 to 3, maybe?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. And I remember I worked there for those 5 days a week, and we made just enough in those 4 days a week to pay somebody else to work on that fifth day. And it was rough. Yeah. It was rough. It was very depressing trying to figure out how on earth are we ever going to make it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the biggest benefit coming out of that time was just the people that we met.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Being there and being in front of the type of people that were working at that co-working space, that opened up other opportunities for us. And being consistent and showing up every day of the week, that kind of lended some legitimacy to us as a company, to those people that were working there.
Yeah, I think that got us connected to 5 or 6 big schools in the area, because different representatives were going there for meetings, and they would see us and they would say, this is interesting. You've created this like really small modular cafe experience. What would it look like to maybe do this at our school?
Right.
And I don't think that we had ever explored that idea yet.
Right.
But it was something that we talked to several people for a while about what that would look like to set up in their school. And it was actually after about 6 months that we did an event at a school. And that's what really got our minds thinking. So we had been set up in this co-working space doing, our best day was maybe $60. Right. And then it was a school that was doing an artist talk that wanted us to come and set up and serve coffee to people going into that artist talk. And we set up just for the crowd that was walking in, and they paid us by the hour to be there. And they thought that they would need us there for, I don't know, hour and a half, maybe. Ended up for us, we worked about 15 minutes in that hour and a half.
Right. And
we did $400. And I remember thinking, like, I haven't made $400 in like months.
Yeah.
And we did it in one day.
Yeah. And that is what kind of was the mentality shift from trying to trying to be in places for longer periods of time to doing those short time frame, very much events type spaces where we can charge by the hour.
Yeah. So before then, we were trying to charge by how many people were going to be there and how many of them were coffee drinkers. And it was it wasn't consistent at all.
Or in the case of farmers markets or places like the co-working space, we're just charging by the cup.
Right.
And that's a hard game to play.
Yeah. So I guess it was then that we decided, okay, we're gonna pause on any sort of co-working type space or anything that's going to tie up our equipment, where we can't go to a business and say, hey, if you let us be here for an hour, we'll charge you a flat rate and we'll give coffee to whoever we can. We'll serve as many cups as we can in that hour.
Right.
And that's when things started to really kick off for us.
Yeah. And I think that's probably about the time we built out our second setup, because the struggle we were having is we had all these semi-permanent places. We were at the bakery on the weekend. We were at the co-working space during the week. But because all of that equipment was tied up, then we couldn't do these events. So we built out a second setup so that we could start doing events. And I think when we realized how good those by the hour things were, we put a pause on. I know. Well, we stopped at the bakery altogether at that point, right?
Yeah, we did.
And I think we stop at Impact Hub then as well.
Yeah, we stopped kind of around the same time.
So then we had two complete setups, so we could divide and conquer and both be doing events.
Yeah. But we should also mention that's around the time, a couple months before we left Impact Hub is when we finished building out the Mini Cooper.
Right.
Which was phenomenal for us.
Right. The Mini Cooper, it's never been the most amazing equipment setup to monetize, but it has, from a marketing standpoint, has been huge for us.
Absolutely huge.
So I'll throw a picture up here on the video podcast, but the Mini Cooper is all of the same things we had on a cart, just permanently attached in the back of a Mini Cooper. Yeah.
So not me, because that's not what you want me to do, but Jared ripped out like almost everything on the inside except the driver's seat.
Yeah, much to my wife's dismay. I was like, hey, I'm going to destroy our Mini Cooper.
So, and then we started building out all that pieces of equipment, the same kind of equipment that we had on the table. We just put that in the Mini Cooper so we could drive around and do it. And then we had that idea of what would it look like for us to be able to take the Mini Cooper out and just make coffee on the fly.
Right.
And I guess it was around that time that I don't even remember how we heard about the accelerator.
Right. I think it was actually from when we were at Impact Hub. I think that was one of the people. There was an event at Impact Hub where we met the people from.
You're right. I think we sat in that room and they were talking about this startup accelerator, and someone suggested that we apply, and we did, and we got in, and that was tremendous for us. It came with $25,000 and a whole bunch of instruction, and to say that that $25,000 was beyond anything that we could have come up with at the time.
Yeah, at that point, that was like a year's worth of revenue.
Yeah. So we used those funds to finish building out this concept with the Mini Cooper of being able to have portable power,
right,
to be able to do coffee anywhere. We thought if we could create an app and a portable power situation, then people could order just like they order from any other food ordering platform. We drive to them and then make their coffee fresh because all the equipment's in the car.
Right. And all hot and powered on and ready to go.
Yeah. So we spent however long it was, 3 months, working on that project. tweaking all the business pieces as well, which I guess we can get into that later about all the things that we learned. And then we got to the end of that accelerator. We did a pitch competition that we didn't win, but we learned so much in the process. It wasn't bad, not by any stretch. And
I think that was really, there was a bit of a mentality shift there too, where we had been so focused on the craft of coffee and the art of making coffee.
Yeah.
That was the mentality shift. Like, okay, this is also a business.
Yeah.
And that accelerator really helped us to kind of refocus on the business part of running a successful coffee company.
Yeah.
As opposed to just how can we brew the best cup of coffee, which obviously is very important. But we had a lot of experience in that, and we didn't have a lot of experience in running a successful business.
Yeah.
So I think that was a huge change of mindset for us. And that's really when we kind of shifted gears a little bit.
Yeah. Because I guess it's subjective, but our barista skill has always been really great.
Right.
But figuring out how to run the business and how to figure out all those pieces, that was where we had to learn a whole lot.
Right.
And so
we also kind of fell in love with it. I mean, the making coffee is a lot of fun. And I always kind of, maybe because I didn't understand the business side, I just thought that was the super boring part that all the boring accountants could take care of.
Yeah.
But really we kind of fell in love with like the bigger picture business growing aspect of what we were doing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think to this day, that's been a big focus for us. It's like, what does the whole thing look like? It's still making great coffee.
Yeah.
Still having excellent customer service, but now how do we do the marketing well? And how do we do all of the other pieces that go into creating a successful business?
Yeah. So meanwhile, while all that's going on with this accelerator, we also started doing some consulting for other coffee shops in town. Our team was super small. I think there were only 4 of us at the time, because I think Phil was with us.
Correct. And
the roasting partner that we had was no longer with us. And so we were getting our coffee from a different coffee roaster in town through a private label situation. And we started meeting people who wanted to open cafes or who wanted to better their cafes, who didn't necessarily have the coffee experience,
right,
and wanted to gather some of that from us. And so we consulted and we talked with them about what makes for a really great shop. Even though we were thinking at the time, for us, we don't want to do brick and mortar things, but we will help you do it because we can. And it was that it extended the runway because it provided us a little bit of funds in order to be able to do that.
Right.
So we did that for, I don't know how long it was. I guess it was summer of 2018 to 19.
Yeah, it was at least 1 year.
Yeah.
Maybe even a year and a half.
Yeah.
It was a pretty significant amount of time.
Yeah. And eventually those consulting questions led to bigger conversations where, at least this one cafe owner said, you guys seem to really know what you're doing. What would it look like to partner a little bit closely and just let you guys run the cafe in addition to all the mobile stuff that you're doing? And for us at the time, it wasn't like we didn't consider doing brick and mortar stuff before, because one of the things we realized was, people are nervous to buy, a hot brown beverage out of the back of a car of a company you've never heard of. And so we thought, well, maybe if we had a brick and mortar presence, people would be more comfortable with our product, driving around town and doing this. But we didn't have that. And we knew that it's expensive and complicated. I mean, that was the whole reason why we didn't do it originally.
Right.
Because we wanted to do these mobile things. But we eventually got to this point where we're thinking, maybe it would give us an opportunity.
Yeah. And it was really a twofold benefit to having a brick and mortar. After doing all of these events, we noticed 2 very distinct things. One, like you said, people don't want to buy coffee out of the back of a car from some company they never heard of. So the marketing aspect, the brand recognition aspect of it was huge for us.
Yeah.
And the second piece was just having a home base. Like we were having to go buy milk and for every single event that we did. And then at the end, we have half a gallon of milk left. And what do you do with that? Well, you can't just stick it in your fridge.
So much milk you can drink. Yeah.
So having that home base where we can use some of the stock for an event and then just bring the rest back, and then it can still be used and we're not throwing away. We're not having a ton of waste. So it was kind of a twofold benefit to doing that, and which is why we agreed to that kind of scenario to partner with this other cafe, this brick and mortar cafe.
Yeah. So
when was that? When did we officially partner with Milk and Honey?
We officially partnered with Milk and Honey August of 2019. That was when we formalized the agreement that we would take over the operations of the cafe, and we would continue to do our mobile stuff on the side. Right. And it was just a very beautiful match. It just worked out super, super well for us. And so that partnership / acquisition came with other opportunities too. They had more cafes in the works in construction, and they said, hey, if we partner with you in this, can you just take over all of them? And we thought, okay, this is great. And then they threw a price tag at us.
Right.
Which was not great,
right,
because as we've said, we did not have any money.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people have this misconception that we just like bought Milk and Honey, which I think we would have loved to have done. That would have been great, but that's not the kind of money that we had available to us. And so the structure of that deal actually worked out really well. And I think this is sometimes where you can get creative in business and make a win-win. We basically traded the Milk and Honey cafe, the existing cafe, and the future build-outs for an equity stake in Vagrant Coffee. So we took over, we own the Milk and Honey stores, and the folks that had started it are now a equity partner in Vagrant Coffee, the parent company.
Yeah. What they really wanted was, because they love real estate, commercial real estate. And what they really wanted was a replicable coffee situation for their real estate enterprises. And so what we did was we provided them that foundation of how to run coffee shops really well. It helped us with our mobile capacity as we expanded. And for them, it gave them the peace of mind that they could just start something and we could take it over and go with it, which for us felt like a huge win. There wasn't any large amount of money that needed to change hands. We have complete and total control over what we do in the cafes, and they really just wanted to be silent partners in the deal. And so it worked out beautifully.
Right.
Beautifully. With no money, we just acquired 3 cafes.
Right. The one operating cafe and 2 that are under construction.
Right.
So that was just...
It was August 2019.
So 9 months ago.
Yeah.
So as of 9 months ago, that happened. We took over an operating retail store, and it has become our hub for events. We still do all the events just as we always have. In fact, it's grown exponentially since we took over the store. Beyond
what we imagined it would. It satisfied for us that desire where a customer might ask when they see us out on the street or at an event, and they say like, oh, where are you located? Where's your shop? Which before it was really difficult for us, and we'd say like, oh, we don't have one. And then people would, say like, oh, well, when you guys get serious.
Right. When you grow up and get your big boy pants on.
So now we have this really beautiful space. It's where we're recording today. At Milk and Honey. It's right above Penn Station. It's a really beautiful space, beautiful cafe. And it allows us to do all the things that we hope to be able to do. And then it gives us this opportunity in the future. So what we learned through this process is it's really great to have a base of operations for each of our mobile concepts. But that's really hard to do some places in some ways without some sort of physical presence.
Right.
And so for us, it's a huge win to give that physical presence, give us that base of operations to be able to launch out our special events from there. So it's not like we don't do special events, we still do. And it's certainly that it's not that we don't like brick and mortar stuff. We came up in brick and mortar stuff. It kind of melds the two together in a really beautiful way.
Right.
But it also answers the question of, we get asked a whole lot inside Milk and Honey, like, oh, this is Milk and Honey, but I see Vagrant Coffee stuff everywhere. What's that about? And we're constantly having to explain to people like, oh, well, Vagrant Coffee owns Milk and Honey. And it doesn't need to be confusing. It's the same place that you think it is. So you come here and get your snacks, you can get your coffee. We're also doing other stuff in addition to that. So we're still in the process of figuring out that language and figuring out branding and how to fix this going forward. So that way it's not confusing to people. But we haven't figured out all the pieces to that yet.
And then throwing in one more level of complication in, was it this
October?
Yeah. We acquired another brick and mortar company, which was our first wholesale account, called 3 Bean Coffee. And so now we're trying to operate 3 different brands.
Yeah.
We have Milk and Honey, 3 Bean Coffee, and Vagrant Coffee.
Yeah. Vagrant Coffee is kind of like the umbrella over them all.
Right.
We just happen to have several cafes in town that have different names. So in a way, it's kind of like a restaurant group where, sure, it has different logos on the outside for right now. But soon, as we figure out all these pieces, some of those things will start to change, and hopefully it'll make more sense to our customers, and they won't think like, oh, I don't understand, how does this work? Like, it says this on the outside, but everything on the inside says this. So we're trying to iron that out to make it super simple and easy for everybody to understand.
Yeah. And we're still definitely learning as we go. As you've heard throughout this story, we've probably made about 1 million mistakes, and at least, and we just kind of keep pivoting and changing and tweaking our business model. So right now we're operating 3 different brands, and as we continue to figure out what's working best and what we keep and what we don't keep and what we combine, these are all like things that will change over time.
Yeah.
So
I don't regret it. It's been a really, really wonderful, but also very, very hard ride. So many sleepless nights and waking up in the middle of the night having panic attacks about how we're going to pay our bills, and signing leases that are really, really long and they have really high dollar amounts. Not to mention the current situation we're in with this coronavirus.
Yes.
And so that's not been fun at all. Acquiring employees has been part of the journey. As we acquired different places, we acquired the staff, and so we have to retrain them on how we do things. That's not been easy by any stretch.
Right.
But those are some of the things that we want to get into. As this story kind of unfolds, we want to be able to teach what we've learned. We want to be able to explore some of the things that we're continuing to learn.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the idea behind this whole podcast is we want to talk through some of the stumbling blocks that tripped us up.
Yeah.
And hopefully help other folks out there. And not necessarily only in the coffee world. I think they're applicable to a whole bunch of different industries.
Yeah.
But maybe hearing some of these experiences will help some other folks avoid some of the pitfalls and mistakes that we made. Yeah,
absolutely. We are constantly looking at industries outside of coffee to understand how business works better. I don't even know how many books we've read since the beginning of Vagrant. I mean,
we should put our reading list up.
We should.
On the website.
I know it's bigger than 60.
Oh yeah.
The amount of things that we've had to learn or have gotten to learn through this experience, we know are valuable to us, and we know that they'll be valuable to other people too. So if we can just share a little bit of that, I think with with people who are interested in maybe starting their own business. It doesn't have to be coffee.
Right.
The things that we've learned are so wide and vast. I remember even just in building out the table, we were looking at like RV companies and mobile power banks and things that have nothing to do really with coffee at all, but they've been super meaningful and helpful for us. So now we're at this stage where we're kind of established. We've hit that 3-year mark. We are stable. And at one point in time, we had 26 employees. Right. And now we've kind of dialed that back a little bit.
Yeah, in a very short period of time, we went from 2 employees to 26 and then down to 5.
Yeah.
As this coronavirus chaos came across our desk.
Yeah.
But what the coronavirus has allowed us to realize is that we can now get some of these things done that we've wanted to do for a long time, and this podcast is one of them.
Yeah, sharing this story.
Yeah, and we would love feedback if you guys have any specific things that you're interested in hearing about. I don't know, we're still figuring out exactly what this podcast looks like going forward, but like the rest of our story, I'm sure it will be tweaked and pivot a little bit, and yeah, we'd love feedback on what you guys want to hear about.
Yeah, so if you want to figure out more about what's going on with us, feel free to go to vagrantcoffee.com. That's our website. It is constantly under construction.
Yep.
So please be forgiving, but it's a great way where you can find out more about a little bit of this and that with the company. You can buy beans. You can hopefully soon, if we can get all the system up and running, you can order coffee there and then come by and pick it up at our store.
You can book events.
You can book events. We would love for you to schedule as many events as you can. That's a really big deal for us. It's really fun for us, and from what we've heard, really fun for our clients too. We've done all sorts of events. No event is off the table. We've done, little kids' birthday parties.
Some events might be off the table.
That's true. I don't know. It's really weird doing some of those bachelorette parties, but we've done, yacht events. We've done big name musicians at different arenas. We've done
crazy birthday parties.
The craziest. So whatever it is, if you have an event where you got a bunch of people gathered, which I know is hard to do nowadays since we don't really gather right now, but in the future,
but be planning ahead.
Yeah, plan ahead, and then let us know, because we'd love to do coffee there, and it'll be a lot of fun. So search us out, social media. We're all over the place: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Look us up, Vagrant Coffee, and then give us your feedback on what it is that you're wanting to know. Maybe we can chat about it, or what you think of our story so far. And I guess we will talk to you soon.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Hey, everybody. This is Josh and Jared with the Vagrant Coffee HustleCast.
Tune in every Tuesday for new content at vagrantcoffee.com.
Please like and share and subscribe.
Drink Vagrant Coffee
and make life better.